Next, as you can see here, this terrain looks pretty boring as it is. White, washed out, just monochromatic, just one color, one material, absolute garbage as it is. Does not look right. Does not look as it did in the final image, and the reason for that is before I created a texture and I actually applied it to the terrain. So the way that we're going to do that is to select the terrain and go to the terrain settings. Actually, no, not the terrain settings. We're going to go to paint texture. We're going to go under textures, and it says no terrain textures defined. We're going to hit edit textures, this option here, add texture. As for this texture, this is the one that we are going to actually apply to the image. As for the normal, as for this texture, this is for bump maps. This is for if you want to assign a special image that will make a surface look like it has bump, or it looks like it has surface imperfections, or like a bumpy surface basically. Basically it's a special image that creates an illusion of height information. So we're not going to use this because we did not design a map for that. What we're going to do is to select this slot and only this one, and we're going to input this texture that we just made, obviously, and then we're going to hit add. And you can see here it definitely looks a lot better. However, the points are not green as obviously you want. You want green points. So you are going to select edit texture, and then I'm going to change the size to something like 16 by 16 because that's what we created in the image. So now we can just hit apply changes, and as you can see, the grass looks a lot more green now. And this looks a lot cooler than it did. Obviously there's this kind of banding because this is the way that I'm doing this. This might just be a problem I'm not going to be able to deal with. Okay, so one more thing to note is that the grass actually looks less green than the one in the final image. And that's because I actually did make the mistake last time of making a too large airbrush and then resizing it to fit the image. Because of that, I kind of had to do like a workaround, like filling the background and then like creating using that fill and then like maybe changing like the fill color of like the main background color, like the main color, the first fill color to like green. I don't know what I did exactly, but basically I kind of had to do a workaround that made the grass like green because you can't change the color of the airbrush. I have a new idea of a workaround that we're going to use. We're going to open the chain simulation terrain texture. In this airbrush, we want each of these pixels to be larger than it is now because obviously it's not covering enough of each point of the grass in our generated terrain. So what we're going to do is to select the airbrush and choose effect. And before we do this, we're going to adjust the color of this to maybe be a bit more saturated because, so what we're going to do is choose effect blur, and it just completely, it looks like it's destroying this grass. It just looks like it's not there anymore. However, actually, if we do this, then it starts to look like it's there again. And because basically what it's doing is it's blurring out the grass and making an image in the process. So we're going to blur it by maybe about that amount. Just hit OK, and then just like check the points of this image. That's the first thing that we're going to attempt to try. And we're also going to export this. So ChainSim terrain texture, go back into Unity, and it's going to obviously import this. And it actually looks like almost completely brown in some spots. We obviously don't want this to look brown. I guess the other thing that we're going to try, select this, and because it's made this an image, by blurring it, we're going to select, oh my god, can I not undo this? Okay, so I guess maybe a workaround for this, go to the chain simulation height map image, select the airbrush and copy it over here and paste it, and I guess just try to find where it was placed last. Where was it this thing was placed last? Okay, that seems like it might be the place. And we do want to keep it aligned. So this is the strongest pixel, it seems like. Okay, not group, airbrush thing here. And we can just change this to a green color, move it under the trail, and we have the original airbrush again, I hope. So now what we're actually going to do now is to select, rotate and resize. And then we're actually going to, so let me just kind of give you a bit of an example of what we're going to do here. So what we want to do is to resize each of these pixels to have one pixel on the side and one kind of on the right to kind of have a 3 by 3 square. So right click on it and we're going to choose 33.33. Doesn't really support like decimal values. So we're going to just choose 33 and hit end. And you can see here that this is actually like a smaller version of the airbrush. And what we're going to do next is right click on it and select export as image. Save this just as airbrush probably. Then we're going to go into Unity here. Just maybe move this window a bit. Close the ChainSim height map. We don't need that anymore. Drag in the airbrush. And this will be much easier to align because I know where both of them are exactly. So you can see that, let me just show you one thing. If I like move them, it kind of distorts them. By the way, I'm using the arrow keys in case you're curious. Okay, so definitely now these pixels are like overlapping. We're going to just basically disable the airbrush, I guess. And now we're going to rotate and resize to 300%. And then hit end. And this is going to create a blurred, like a texture. Basically, this is an image texture with kind of these larger spots of grass that are going to go onto each of the points on the terrain that we've generated using the airbrush in the height map texture. And because this is not an airbrush, because we've worked around this, it's an image. So you need to kind of be careful when you're using that. So now we can just export this again. This method, I hope this works. This I think is a better method, I guess. I think this might be a better method. So now just kind of hit replace. And you can see that it's definitely not aligned. So because we changed it to 33, like changing it to 300% from 33, so like 300% of 33, so 3 times 33, would be like changing it to 99. So we might want to open this terrain texture just a bit more. Click on the image and just rotate and resize. 300%. We might want to change this to 303%, which is the equivalent of 101%. I don't know why it saved these 300 values here. It like resets it, I guess. What we're going to do now is just export this again. Hit F to focus on this terrain so we can actually see it. Go into top view and you can see that it's slightly offset. Maybe just open this. And this is why, like, this is kind of fiddly process here. Maybe move this down just a bit here. I think this might work better. I'm moving it left by 2 pixels and moving it like down by 3. And I guess that'll do for now. Now the grass looks a lot more green and it stands out a lot better. If the grass is a bit too high, because again, it's like pointy, because we just generated it using a complete height map, it's just completely vertical. We could also decrease the height by darkening, just slightly darkening the color of the grass airbrush in the height map paint file. We can do that if we wanted to. But yeah, this is the workaround that I'm using to create the nicer looking airbrush for the grass. One other thing here, this trail section of this height map, this terrain, it looks just completely solid, this color, just this solid color, and it's completely flat. However, there is a way that we can fix this. Add some bump to this trail. Now, of course, we could edit the height map, maybe like create some airbrushes just over this trail, and maybe blur them as well just a bit, because the colors, like it might just kind of create more like holes in the trail. However, that would kind of be a bit cumbersome. So we're going to create the bump using the terrain tools in Unity. Select the paint height tab, and now we're going to select a brush. Select, I guess, this one for now. And we're going to set the brush size to something like 100. See what this does. And you can see that it creates this kind of bumpy effect. Now, of course, it looks like really displaced on this terrain. It's really, really strong. It's way too strong. We're going to set the opacity, which is the strength of your drawing, something like 20 for a start. And now when we draw this, it's a lot less strong. And maybe we can just change this view here And now select the terrain object, paint height, and you can see here that the bump, we want it to kind of be a bit fast with this. Actually, we can change the opacity to something a bit lower, and we kind of want to be a bit like at a moderate speed with this. We want the edge of the brush to be maybe just a kind of aligned, just kind of align as best as we can with the edge of the trail when we're doing this. And then we also want another kind of brush. We want to kind of create another kind of effect here on this edge of the trail. And by the way, this operation that I'm doing right now, it was not nearly as fast the last time I tried to record this. And that's because of the Metal Graphics API, editor graphics device. That definitely caused a bit of like, it was not nearly as smooth as this. So what we're going to do is, again, I definitely recommend try experimenting with this if you find problems, especially on like a macOS computer. We're going to change the brush size to something like 33, and we're going to kind of experiment with this. Maybe like 40 or something, 37. That looks about right for this. And it might create kind of this line here. So actually maybe something 50, closer to 50. And so the edge will kind of overlap this. And we don't want it to be any stronger, so we can just undo that, paint height again. We want to be kind of fast with this. Look at a reasonable speed with this. And then, as you can see here, definitely some ideal looking bumpiness on the trail. And what this is doing is displacing the geometry of the terrain, so it's moving the vertices that are along this trail section. Even though this is flat, it still has like a bunch of different like polygons. In fact, if we go into wireframe mode, you can see that it just looks totally black, but then when we zoom on this, you can see that it's all polygons. It's geometry, and the faces between the edges of these polygons, they fill out the geometry. And as you can see here, it kind of culls in like sections of it, and it gets less dense as you move out to like maybe here. What you're doing with this is you're moving all the vertices. Okay, so what we'll move into now, placing and creating all of the wooden posts along this edge here. So now we're going to move this up. Game view here, the camera, the FPS controller is definitely not oriented in a way that is very ideal for this. Let's actually just test how this first-person controller works on this terrain. Okay, so I've also just positioned this chain link here, and what we're going to do next is to duplicate this wooden post and create copies of it along the edge of this trail. And then, of course, we're going to feed the chain through each of the holes in each one. So we first want to make sure that the hole is in the right orientation for this, which we obviously have. We want the hole to be in this direction and not this direction. Otherwise, we'll have to rotate each one by 90 degrees individually. And so now we're going to just hit Command D to duplicate it and go into top view mode again. Put this one maybe about here and maybe rotate it and move it. Hit E to rotate. Now, I kind of find this a bit confusing sometimes. It's QWE, which is kind of clever because it's like QWER, etc. However, because it's E to rotate, and rotate starts with R, kind of, I don't know, seems a bit confusing. Seems just like so close to being like that perfect opportunity to put, okay, so just put this about here. I guess that's going to be it. Like a couple of them. It's a bit more like this, and duplicate this one, and just maybe zoom in just a bit more like this, and maybe offset these a bit more from the side of the trail. Maybe shift select these two, move them like this, and like that. We've created all of these wooden posts now. Make sure that the holes are in the right orientations for this. And now we're going to feed the chain through it. What we're going to do is to go, I guess, back into top view, maybe side view here in the right kind of orientation, and maybe top view will also fix this. So we're going to just kind of make it a bit more aligned. We want it as high as we want it to be. However, we also want it to be like aligned so maybe select the wireframe option. So this way we can actually see where the hole that we cut into the wooden posts is using the cylinder. You can see the cylindrical thing through it, and you can see how thick it is. So what we're going to do now is to essentially just turn auto instantiate off, and because I edited the script actually, it will actually work with auto instantiate turned off. So I'm definitely going to update the script and maybe just negate this local position thing. Maybe just rotate it just slightly. And maybe give it like a kind of a step distance. We're going to negate this, we're going to reverse negate the value, check auto instantiate, and this is going to instantiate this, and maybe in this example it's a bit too far spaced apart. So let's just go ahead and maybe 0.1, apply, maybe 0.12. Just kind of feed this through here, and you can see here that you're creating this chain right there. So now we're going to feed this through all of these different things. Maybe just disable the terrain for now. We don't want this completely black, like in high contrast to this. Select this one, and we want to actually be able to rotate the chain as it's kind of doing this. So we're going to kind of world rotation modifier, and we need to keep in mind if we want to rotate this left, you want to set like a negative value, and you also want to set it to something low. So you want to, like in this case, you would want to do like a really smooth curve. So we just go straight for now, and if we run into any problems, okay, so that might be a potential problem here. We can always kind of move the wooden posts. That's kind of why we sort of offset them from the edge of the trail, just to give ourselves a bit more leeway with this is one of the reasons why we did that. Now, set this to something low, like -1, and again, use the world rotation modifiers. This is definitely kind of faulty. So that's why we have the option of moving the stakes, the posts, sorry. I want to say stakes. Stakes are like thin things that you kind of hammer into the ground. I don't know. Okay, so I guess we're at the end now. Congratulations. So now we're going to create a few more of these, just to create kind of an extension, just a bit of overhang chain. So now you can see here, according to this instances in scene variable, we have 165 chains in this scene right now. If we just go over here, and let's actually test how the simulation works. Luckily, I didn't leave any of the constraints accidentally like set on. I don't want any constraints for this. I want the stakes to constrain the chains. And you can see we have a problem there. Is there something wrong with the size of the chains relative to this? It seems to like be breaking at the points of the... Oh, is it because we... Oh my god. No, not that issue again.